Hello, all. I'm going to read some chapters from Echo, a book that I've been meaning to read for quite some time, one that Mrs. Rash recommended I read about a year ago. And so it starts off sort of like a prologue before the chapters begin with this. 50 years before the war to end all wars, a boy played hide and seek with his friends in a pear orchard bordered by a dark forest. Mathilde, who was it, sat on a boulder, buried her head against her knees, and began to count to 100. The boy hurried away, determined to stay hidden longer than all the others, hoping to impress Mathilde. Her lilting voice intrigued him. Even now, as she counted, her words sounded sing song 36, 37, 38, 39. Although it was strictly forbidden, the boy ran into the forest to hide. Every few yards, he looked back to make sure he could still see the pear orchard behind him. When it was nothing more than a speck in his view, he sat against the tree trunk within a cluster of pines. From far away, he heard Mathilde's faint call. "Here I come, ready or not." The boy smiled, thinking about the moment he would waltz back to home base, triumphant. He'd have to be patient, though, for it would take some time for everyone to be rooted from their hiding spots. He pulled a book from his waistband, one of the two things he had bought that very morning from a gypsy for a pfennig. He ran his fingers over the title embossed in the leather cover, The 13th Harmonica of Otto Messenger. He had not been able to resist the purchase, especially with such a peculiar coincidence. The title held his given name, Otto. He opened the book and began to read. And on this page it becomes darker, so contrast. Once, long before enchantment was eclipsed by doubt, an anxious and desperate king awaited the birth of the first child. As it was written, the king's eldest would inherit the kingdom, but only if the child was a son. If the firstborn was a daughter, the monarchy would someday pass to the king's younger brother, his most ardent rival. Alas, the queen delivered a girl, but the king was devious. Moments after the birth, he whisked the infant away and ordered the loyal midwife to take it deep into the forest and leave it for the animals. He forbade the midwife to speak of it ever again. Then the king told the queen and his subjects that the baby had not survived the birth. The kind-hearted midwife hiked into the woods, knowing she could never abandon the child. As she pushed through the brambles and climbed over the logs, she sang lullabies to the wide-eyed infant. When she stopped singing, the baby wailed. Time and again the midwife obliged, bumming and crooning until she reached her destination, a tumble-down cottage that belonged to her cousin, a selfish and lazy witch. "Won't you take this child?" begged the midwife. "You already have goats for milk, and someday she might sweep the hearth for you." "I suppose," said the witch, "I will call her Ines." The midwife thought it cruel to give the baby a number instead of a name, but she knew it was a far better fate than becoming breakfast for the bears. She kissed the small bundle and whispered the one gift she could bestow, a prophecy. "Your fate is not yet sealed. Even in the darkest night a star will shine. A bell will chime, a path will be revealed." She spat at the ground to secure the fortune, left the child with the witch, and fled. Within 2 years, the queen delivered another daughter. The king gave the same instruction to the midwife, who stole to the forest, singing all the while, for this baby, too, would be consoled only with song. At the cottage, the midwife beseeched the witch again. "Won't you take this child? Someday she might gather wood for you." "I suppose," said the witch, "I will call her Zwei." Another number for a name. It seemed a false start, but still a far better fate than becoming lunch for the wolves. The midwife kissed the baby and whispered the prophecy again. "Your fate is not yet sealed. Even in the darkest night, a star will shine, a bell will chime, a path will be revealed. She spat at the ground to secure the fortune, left the baby with the witch, and fled. 2 years had passed, and yet another baby girl was born. 3 daughters, one after another. The king repeated the same deception, and the midwife dutifully traipsed into the forest, serenading all the while, for the infant's only solace, like her sisters, was a melody. When the midwife reached the cottage, she implored the witch to keep this baby too. Some day she might stoke the fire for you. I suppose, said the witch, I will call her Dre. Thus I can remember who was first, second, and third. She held up 3 fingers, ticking one after the other. Eins, zwei, drei. Again the midwife foresaw a bleak life ahead for the nameless child, yet one far better than becoming dinner for the wild boar, and she would have her sisters for companions. Eins and zwei, who were already in service to the witch and toting small bundles of kindling, rushed to the midwife's side to meet their sister. The midwife looked from the witch's hovel to the dirty, uncombed waifs, already cooling at the infant in her arms. She kissed the baby and whispered, Your fate is not yet sealed. Even in the darkest night a star will shine, a bell will chime, a path will be revealed. She spat at the ground to secure the fortune, left the child with the witch, and fled. At last, a month passed. A year later, the queen delivered a boy. The king happily proclaimed that this first child had been born, a son. Throughout the kingdom, a church bell rang in celebration for their heir to the throne, who would one day be king. And so now we're switching back to the original story. Otto looked up from the book. He'd been so absorbed in this story that he'd forgotten to hide and seek, and the game itself. The forest had become cold and windy. The trees rustled and swayed. Otto shivered and looked toward that pear orchard, straining to hear his friends in the distance. Had he missed the call? Ali Achin free, the signal for one of those who were still hiding to finally show themselves? He stood there, tucking the book in his waistband. A sudden gust lifted his cap from his head. Otto spun around until he caught it. He peered between the trees, but he had lost sight of the pear orchard. Otto wandered for hours. He yelled, but the wind grew stronger and muffled his calls. His mind raced with what he had heard about the woods, the dystropin caves inhabited by trolls, dangerous precipices that dropped into witches' lairs, mud bogs that swallowed children in one giant slurp, not to mention the perils of bears, wolves, and wild boar. He rushed from tree to tree, searching for far way out. In his panic, he tripped over a berm of twisted root and fell. The world swirled. Minutes or hours later, he wasn't sure. He sat up, touched his forehead, and felt a bump the size of an egg. Frightened, he covered his face with his hands and began to cry. Between sobs, he heard a trio of voices. This way, come closer, we will help you. Otto raised his head to see who spoke, but saw only the fluttering of shadows through the trees. Whimpering, he stood, taking hesitant steps until he came upon a procession of fir trees that formed an immense circle. He sidled between the trunks and found himself in a clearing. 3 young women dressed in tattered frocks stood before him, the first a head taller than the second, who was a head taller than the third. They all talked at once. At long last, a visitor. Hello, boy, you poor thing. You must be weary. Oh dear, you have hurt your head. Sit down and rest. Slowly, Otto sat up on the tree stump. Who are you? Don't be frightened. You are safe with us. I am Eins, said the tallest, and these are my sisters, Zwei and Dre. Otto pulled out the book and stared at it. But you couldn't be. Those are the very characters from this story. It must be our story, then, said Eins. Perchance, does it have a happily ever after? Asked Zwei, wringing her hands. Dre pointed at the book. Might you read us it so that we may know our providence? The three sisters quickly sat and huddled around him and leaned forward, their eyes eager. Otto rubbed his brow, feeling lightheaded. He looked at Eins, Zwei, and Dre, who seemed hungry for the telling. If the story was true, they had been torn from their mother's arms. What must have it been like to never know her? His heart ached at the idea of never seeing his mother again. Please, asked Zwei, perhaps we can help one another. Otto thought it all strange, but he did feel safe within the tree circle. The sisters seemed harmless, and they appeared to only be ones who might guide him out of the forest. He turned his back to the beginning of the book and read the first chapter again, this time aloud. He glanced up. Eins, Zwei, and Dre held one another's hands, their faces rapt. Otto cleared his throat and continued. A secret, a spell, a final deed. And so now this is back in the book of the story Otto was reading. Eins, Zwei, and Dre grew up in the far-off cottage in the woods. The witch told them they were fondlings, and reminded them every day of how grateful they should be for her generosity. But it wasn't easy to be grateful. The cottage was dark and ramshackle. The witch never replaced the thatch. She made the three sisters wear rags, and she did not love them. Heavens, no, she was as indifferent to them as she was to stone in a stream. But the witch found them useful because from dawn to dusk they swept and toted and washed and cooked. Imagine how spoiled the witch had become. The sisters had two consolations in their lives of drudgery. The first was singing. They had three distinct voices. The first, that was a bird song. The second, a book of trickling over smooth stones. And the third, the yodel of a wind through the hollow logs. When they sang, their voices blended so magically that the entire forest, from trolls to fairies, stopped to listen and marvel at their gifts. Even the witch recognized their talent, but at the same time she was jealous. When she ordered them about, she snidely called their names of musical instruments, her favorite being my little piccolos. The sisters' other solace was one another. Every night, as they lay on their pallets of straw and looked at the night sky through the holes of the roof, Eins repeated the midwife's prophecy as if it were a prayer. Your fate is not yet sealed. Even in the darkest night, a star will shine, a bell will chime, a path will be revealed. Then each in turn they sang about the little birds, so that they easily took swing from the forest. For Eins, Zwei, and Dry had not given up hope that they had too might one day leave. They dreamed of a safe and cozy home and a family who loved them and called them by name. The years passed. The king's brother, his rival, died young. All of the king's manipulations had been for naught, but still he did not make known the horrible secret of abandoning his three daughters in the forest. As his son came of age, and misguided king took ill and relinquished the throne, the kingdom hastened to prepare for the son's lavish coronation, but the king did not live to see it. Every subject was invited to the festivities at the castle and offered an audience with the newly crowned king. When it was the midwife's turn to approach the throne in the great hall, she realized there was no reason to keep silent any longer. She confided the story to the monarch and his mother, who were overcome with joy. Without ado, the young king sent the midwife to find his sisters. Once again, the midwife traveled deep into the forest to the cottage. When Eins saw the midwife approaching, she ran to her and asked, "Have you brought us another sister?" The midwife smiled. "Oh, child, I have brought you so much more." Upon hearing the news of their family, Eins, Zwei, and Dry hugged one another and cried from happiness. The dreams they carried in their hearts had come true. They had a home, a family, and they were princesses. When the witch saw I'm sorry. When the witch saw that they meant to go, she became furious. She raised her arms, and the forest shuddered beneath her fury. Pointing to the three sisters, she yelled, "Ungratefuls! You would leave me after all I've done